will look at, employing these techniques. So going further, now how do you estimate the internal supply? So you do demand forecasting to find out what is the requirement for the future, how many more employees would be required in the future. Now you need to look at estimating the internal supply. So you need to see what is the current stock of employees that you have. How many employees do you have right now? So you will look at the source of inflows. So how many people are going to be coming, how many candidates and new employees or new joinees are going to come to your organization. So this could be on the basis of transfers. Somebody is transferred from another branch, comes to your branch, or somebody from another city where you had operations is now coming into your department, or somebody from another department who is operating now, since there is a vacancy in your department and their skills match, so we're moving them. So some sort of lateral movement is seen. So employees come into a department or come into the organization through transfers. Employees move into a department or move into a level because of promotions, right? So those two are internal movements. And then we have new hires. New hires are new joinees or new candidates that we've employed through the recruitment and the selection process, right? Fourth is sometimes we may have recalls. This is called employee recall. So an employee who has retired, or an employee who has left the organization. So now we feel that this employee's skill sets can match. And if that employee seems to show interest of rejoining or coming back again, so we may recall, right? Until, or this could be for a temporary basis until we find a permanent hire. So we might recall an employee who has left the organization and ask him or her to continue doing the job till we find a replacement. So these are 4 ways by which employees come into the organization. And so that's your current level. So you take the net figures. How many employees do we have in the organization? And then we look at outflows. The number of employees who will be leaving the organization, quitting the organization, moving out of the organization. This could happen because of promotions. So when somebody moves from one department or one level to another level, there is a deficiency at your level, where that position now becomes vacant. Second, employees can quit. They can leave the organization for better pastures, or can leave for better joining other organizations, or take up any other assignments that they would want. Third is termination. Termination is retrenchment. So we are removing, an organization is permanently removing an employee. This could be on the basis of non-performance related aspects, not able to, not achieving the targets or standards that are set for the job to be done, or could be terminated on the basis of disciplinary grounds. We might remove the candidate or an employee because he or she is not fulfilling the requirements ethically, and whatever are the rules of the organization is not following such. So these are terminations, permanently removing the employee. Then we have demotions. So demotion is moving an employee lower the rank to which he or she belongs. And this could happen when their performance is below par, is not up to the standard. So like how promotion is a vertical elevation, a movement to the top. Demotion is a vertical movement to the bottom. So you are pushed back or sent back to a lower level where you had worked previously. Retirements can happen. So these could be voluntary retirements or retirement on the basis of superannuation. Voluntary retirement is somebody is unable, health has been affected, or they have some other personal commitment to give or make. So they are leaving, voluntarily resigning from the organization, voluntary resignations or voluntary retirements. Then we have retiring on superannuation. So when somebody when an employee reaches the age of retirement, in some places it is 56, in some places it is 58, some places it is 60, and in the private sector it is close to around 65. Right? So whatever is the age of retirement that you have set, and when an employee reaches that particular age, he or she automatically leaves the organization or retires on superannuation. Then we have deaths, employees who die midway while they are still working in the organization. And then also employees are asked to leave temporarily whenever there is economic slowdown or a recession, or when the organization is in a situation where we have excess employees and we don't need any of them. So that is how we are looking at inflows and outflows, and then we are trying to see what is the right number that we require. So the current staffing level on the basis of how many inflows are coming in, and then we look at the projected outflows, how many employees will be leaving in a future period of time. So we have to make those estimates. You can't wait for employees to suddenly leave and for you to make that decision. Sudden leaving can happen just in case of a death or one of those unforeseen circumstances. But rest of the times you have a prediction, you have a certain estimate, or these are employees who will retire, or these are employees we are planning to sack. So you already have an estimate. So you can look at the projected outflows or employees that who will be leaving the organization. And then we look at the projected inflows, the numbers that is coming in, the number that is going out, and we look at what is the number that we require as the current level that we need, and then we taper the estimate. So when we do this, the inflows and the outflows, and then we're trying to match that with what is the current requirement that we have, you will have those two scenarios. One scenario is where you will have more employees than what you require, or the second scenario would be you will have less employees than what you require. And then accordingly, we make those decisions, whether to hire or whether to lay off and remove people, or see how we can manage those employees by giving them jobs that we can give in the organization if we are not intending to lay off or send employees back in home. So how do we, what are the different methods that we use? Just like how we used demand forecasting methods to identify the future requirement of people, we do something called supply forecasting. Through the supply forecasting, we are able to understand and arrive at the net number of employees that we have with us, and then how we are going to utilize them for a future period of time. So these are 5 methods that we have. One is called the staffing tables. So a company can use a staffing table to arrive at a supply estimate. We can use a Markov analysis to arrive at a supply estimate to find out how many employees do we have right now with us in the organization. Third, we can do skill inventories so that we are able to identify and know how many employees are there with us, and what sort of skill sets do they possess, not just head count of employees, but also the knowledge, the skill, and the ability and the capacity quotient. So we do skill inventory. So we know what skills and what kind of educational qualifications, capabilities do individuals have. So wherever there is a need and a requirement and a vacancy opens up, we tend to match those individuals with the right skills to the right jobs that are vacant. Then we do replacement charts. So what are replacement charts? Replacement charts help us to have a standby. Who's going to be the next incumbent, right? So just in case this employee leaves, we will try to have a replacement. So immediately somebody to take charge when this individual who is functioning right now is not available to execute his or her duties. And then we do succession planning. Like how I told you in the beginning, there are 2 types of planning that we do: aggregate planning and succession planning. Aggregate planning happens at the bottom of the organizational structure when you're trying to fill in operational level jobs. Succession planning usually happens at the top of the middle management and the top management when we are grooming individuals, mentoring some promising employees and individuals to make sure that they will be able to take up leadership positions or take up departmental head positions and be able to take up those responsibilities whenever the vacancy arises. So we groom and we prepare. We train these individuals, prepare them, mentor them, and keep them ready. So as and when an individual is going to go and is going to go because of the outflow, immediately this individual will be brought in. This incumbent will be brought in to take up that kind of a position. Okay, these are 5 methods that we have. So let's look at all of these a little more in detail. So what is staffing tables? So these are graphical representations of all organizational jobs along with the number of employees currently occupying these jobs and the future employment requirements. So staffing table is something that you prepare very similar to your organization structure. When you have an OS, you have different levels, and then you have different, you can have department level operational structures, organization structures, which is what we call as a department structure. And then each of these department structures, you will have your different levels. You can have 3 or 4 levels of hierarchy, and then you may have different jobs in each of these levels. So in each of these levels, you're going to find out how many jobs are there, how many jobs you have created, and how many employees would you require to do each of these jobs. So what is the current requirement and what is the future requirement of for these set of jobs. So that's what you see with this example over here. So we have managers, supervisor, line worker. So we have three types of jobs. So how many managers do we have with us at this particular level? In this particular department, how many managers do we have? How many do we have right now, and how many would we require in the next 1 year? So likewise for supervisors, how many supervisors do we have currently on the rolls, and how many more supervisors would we require in the future, right? In the next 1 year or in the next 3 years. So for the time period that you're going to do your HRP. So we have these many line workers, and we have these many, who are required. So you have managers, a certain number of managers, a certain number of supervisors, certain number of line workers. So you are going to look at the requirement for the future HRP period, where you are going to estimate the requirement. You're going to see how many managers and supervisors and line workers would you require. So what's the current inventory, and what is the future requirement? And that estimate can tell you whether you require more or whether you have less, right? And then you make those decisions. While you're taking current stock of it, you're also trying to understand how many employees will be moving out, how many managers will retire or go out, or how many supervisors will go out, or how many line workers will go out, right? And accordingly, you make that estimate to find out whether you need more supervisors and managers, line workers, or whether you are having enough managers, supervisors, and line workers, or are you short of certain managers, line workers, and supervisors. So like that, you make a decision. This is a staffing table, just to have an estimate on the number of jobs, number of people, and the requirement. This is an interesting method called the Markov analysis, a method for tracking the pattern of employee movement through various jobs, right? So it's a transition matrix, as we call that, right? So what is the flow of employees? Now, what is the path? Now, this is finding the internal movement or the path that employees are taking within the organization. So let's say, for example, if you look at an employee who joined about 10 years ago, at which position did he take up his job? What was the level at which he was hired, or what was the job and level at which he was hired? And then over the last 10 years, which are the kind of jobs and levels that he or she has moved into? So you are going to track the transition or the path, the career path that was taken by this particular individual over the last 10 years. So when you track employees and find out all the employees in your organization, you do a tracking of the kind of jobs that they've taken up, and then the kind of promotions that they've had, and the kind of roles and responsibilities and positions that they've held over the last number of years that they have worked in the organization. You get an understanding of the kind of job and the kind of experience, the kind of responsibilities that they've taken. So it becomes easy when a particular position opens up. When a particular vacancy opens up and you're looking for who is going to be the right candidate to take up this position. So that is when you will have probable candidates, right? So you will show these are the 4 promising probable candidates. Then if you're looking at the 4 probable candidates, you also need to see their body of work. What is that they've done over the last 10, 15 years? What is their skill sets, and what are the kind of roles and responsibilities that they've taken up in the past, and whether who will be the right person, or who's the most suitable among the 4 potential candidates that we have. So that is where we can look at these estimates. So this will tell us, so and so has worked in this area, has taken up these responsibilities, was in charge of the organization during this particular time. So you list down the profiles. So when you list down the profiles, the selection team that's going to decide who's going to be the next manager or the leader will go by all those profile information and experience information that they have, or the transition information, and then make a decision on who will be the right person to take up. So Markov is very important, especially when we're doing succession planning. Okay, not for hiring new candidates, but for succession planning, to be able to monitor the transition, to be able to monitor the movement and the kind of jobs that they have taken up in the organization. So what is a skill inventory? So skill inventory is, collecting the profiles of all the candidates. So, when you given your CV, and then when you keep updating yourself in terms of experience or training and any other form of reskilling and upskilling that you have gone through, every employee's profile will have skill sets. So, that is something that an organization maintains as a database. They have their internal, HR management system, a software which has all of these skill sets. So whenever you do something and you come up with a certain experience or some new training that you acquired, new skill that you acquired, and you update that on your profile, automatically it gets updated into the database of skill inventory. So next time what happens is when we're looking at a particular job and then what is the requirement, and then we will be able to find out which of these employees have those skills and required knowledge and experience to take up those higher level positions. So trying to find out what sort of skills individuals possess, what sort of experience that they come with, and what sort of interest and education qualifications that they come with, so that we will be able to match the right individual with the right skills for the right kind of jobs and responsibilities. Then we do replacement charts. So replacement charts will give you a picture of who is right now holding the position and who are the probable candidates who are ready to take up that position when the vacancy arises. So replacement, finding the next incumbent or the next individual or the next person, next best person who can take up your position in case you leave or you retire from the organization. And then we have succession planning. This is a process of identifying and developing new managers and new leaders to replace old leaders when they leave, retire, or die. So this is one of those finest methods of trying to recognize, reward employees who have given you very good performance in the organization, very meritorious career track record. They've done extremely well in your organization, and they've pleased the management, pleased the performance appraisers, and they've stuck to the standards. So very, very bright and promising candidates and leaders with a lot of business and managerial acumen, right? And when your organization is looking at who is going to be the next person to lead the organization, so that's where succession planning is a very good method of trying to identify the right person from under your wings. Somebody within your organization will be the most suitable. So that's how people like Satya Nadella, found their job to become the CEO. So that's how Sundar Pichai and many others leading leaders of many Indians who are leading some brilliant corporates around the world. They've all been able to reach to that position is only through succession planning. Somebody who joined as an ordinary software engineer, Satya Nadella's story, right? Slowly he was groomed, given roles and responsibilities, and then he ended up becoming a product team development, a product development leader. And they're looking at the future of what Microsoft needs to go. So the company decided that this should be the right person because product development is going to be the next competitive factor or the area in which the organization needs to really succeed and do well. And then they found out the right replacement. They groomed him, mentored him, and then gave him the responsibility. From a CEO, he's moved to become the chairman. So that's how it works. That's how it operates. Homegrown company like Infosys has also seen succession planning happen very brilliantly over the years, where when a senior most leader has retired, the next incumbent has taken up the position because the next incumbent was groomed, trained, mentored, and somebody who shadowed the leader, right? Somebody who walked along with the existing current leader. And then once the current leader quits or leaves the organization, the management has been good enough to give those positions to these individuals who have been groomed over a period of time. So this is a very interesting aspect of motivating employees within the organization, because anybody who sees a lower rank employee, about 15, 20 years ago, joined the organization, today becomes a CEO. It's a very proud moment for everybody. Somebody who started at the lower order of the organization structure has succeeded to lead the company, is right now in a leadership position. So it's very promising for everybody who works in the organization, because they also begin to experience this and feel that, if at all they also do well, they will also be able to take up a leadership position in the organization. So that's where succession planning helps in a very big way. So this is an example of a replacement chart, right? So this is just a matrix to give you. So these are probable, replacements that we've created. right? And there are indicators. So if you see A and you see those key indicators. These are metrics that we use. A, B, C is one metric, and the 1, 2, 3, 4 is another metric based on the performance of the candidate. Okay, let's say for example, if you have JL Green, JL Green is going to be the next candidate, right? What is JL Green's uh, performance track or performance record right now? He's promotable now, and then above average performance. So the best guy you're looking for. So whenever the senior to JL Green or the senior to the manager's position is going to quit, JL Green is going to be the next candidate because he is the one who's in waiting. So ready for promotion because he's cleared all the kind of checks that the organization has placed. Ready for promotion and has shown above average performance. And then when Green is going to move into his superior's position, you have assistant managers, Gordon and Brown. So one of the two individuals will be the ones who will take up Green's position when Green gets promoted through succession planning. So there are two probables. One is Gorton. Gorton is A2. A2 very similar like Green, promotable now and above average performance. And then you have Brown, needing development, and then 3 is acceptable performance. So between Gordon and Brown, Gordon has got the edge. So automatically when Green moves up, Gordon is going to take up the position of Green. Right? So that is how we create. And then any one of these individuals from the bottom could be elevated to an assistant manager's position. So that's how we create replacement. So we already have incumbents ready, and with their performance records or with their performance grades. So it becomes a lot more easy for the organization because we've always kept it ready. So whenever there is a sudden movement of employee at a key position, finding a replacement is always difficult. But when you have a replacement chart which is already prepared, or you identify the incumbents, it makes it all the more easy. Right. So this is another example of how we can do succession planning. Head of sales, we have Ramli Baker, we have Joseph Van, we have Selina Chan. So these are the ready. These are 3 candidates who are ready to take up that position of head of sales. We have candidates like Rebecca, Abu, and Lee, right, who will be moved into that ready now category in the next 1 or 2 years. So these are the next 1 or 2 years, you can see these candidates to be the most promising people, right? And then you have Irene, Fatima, and Can Weng, who will need more than 2 years, for them to be groomed to take up that position of head of sales. So likewise, we do that. So we have 3 candidates, right? So we have 3 candidates who can take up the head of sales now. Like head of operations, we have 2 candidates. So very similar kind of replacements that companies already have, and they keep this ready. So because you never know when any movement can happen, and then they can move quickly and then take that decision of ensuring they find the replacement within less time. And these are factors that we've seen. So especially when we look at estimating the supply, we need to keep all of these factors also in mind, because when you are hiring people from the job market is the market that you see outside, which is influenced by these factors, right? It's influenced by demographic factors in terms of age, gender, right? Age, gender, it can be from nationality, subcultures, different states, right? So there are demographic changes. So your labor pool is largely influenced by the demographic changes in population. Whether you have more of young employees, or whether you have more of old employees, whether you have more of women or more of men, or more from North India, more from South India. So where do you see a more number of candidates coming into the labor pool or into the labor market? Second, we need to look at national and regional economics. Whether again, we look at whether the labor force is coming from a particular territory or is coming from whether it is regionally balanced. So that is where today we have metros, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So companies do conscious hiring. They don't just make sure that they hire everybody from the metros, but they also make sure that there is equal representation from the tier 1, tier 2, and the tier 3 cities and towns of the country. Third, educational level, because there is a gradual increase in the educational level of employees in the organization. Earlier, a degree was okay, but now almost everybody seemed to be picking up a postgraduate. So education levels are also constantly rising. So in the labor pool, what happens is people more educated will keep coming and adding on to the labor force, to the labor market in course of time. So as and when that happens, automatically you have to make changes in the job specification, because you're getting more highly educated candidates for a very basic level job. So that's what can possibly happen. Demand for specific employee skills can either go up or come down, because people start taking courses. They start studying courses or going and taking up and upgrading or learning new skills on the basis of where the demand is. What kind of jobs are going to be demanded? What kind of skills are going to be demanded? Which kind of jobs give them more money? So there is more movement towards those courses and those forms of education and those forms of skill training where there is a probability of landing a job easily, or a probability of becoming very successful, or the probability of earning more money while being employed on those jobs. So that's where demand for certain jobs will be very high. Supply for certain jobs will be very high, right? So that's what can happen, and then we can always, as an organization, we can always play on the demand and the supply factor of what is available in the labor market. Then we look at population mobility, movement of people from one place to another, right? Mobility, people coming in to different cities and towns in search of jobs. So wherever there is demand, people move. So wherever, when they do not find jobs in their own neighborhood, or they do not find that in their own towns and cities, they will move to towns and cities and places where industry is set up, where employment generation happens quite easily, where demand for labor is very high. So people move, right? So Bangalore is a very good example of how this mobility has helped to build the ecosystem in this state or in this particular place. And then we have governmental policies. So what does government do? What government policies? There's a Ministry of Labor. Ministry of Labor, what do they do? What sort of measures do they take? And then collectively, there are government policies. There are different ministries, the Ministry of Secondary Education, Ministry of Higher Education. So all of them are working at their own ends to see how a qualitative labor can be increased in the country. So the labor pool, the workforce that we're looking at to hire, is often influenced by these factors, and these changes are going to be very dynamic, and year after year, things will become a lot more different in terms of the quality and the quantity of labor that's available for hiring. So we've got to keep this in mind when we are doing our HRP. So where do you get information about all these labor statistics and labor markets and so on? There's a lot of secondary information that's available. You can always go to the Ministry of Labor, and then a whole lot of reports, a whole lot of research, a lot of findings is available. You can go to the State Planning Commission, Local Planning Commission, or you have Niti Aayog, which can also give you estimates. You can go to the Chambers of Commerce, right? So Bangalore Chamber of Commerce, or you can have the Chamber of Commerce for Industry in India, Association Chambers of Commerce. So many other websites that can give you a lot of information about secondary information on a lot of research and a lot of data that's related to the labor market. Then you have industry and trade publications. So every industry has its own newsletters and have their own publications. So you can get information from there. State employment agencies, local employment agencies, state level labor commissions can give you a lot of information. So a lot of information is available because a lot of research, a lot of findings, a lot of reports are generated, and all of that is stored. These are repositories that are available. So as an organization, you should be able to take up, look at some of these statistics and see if your HRP, while you are making those HRP related decisions, whether some of these secondary sources of information will be useful for you to make that decision. So you've got to, sometimes look into these information also. Then finally, what do? You forecast the demand and find out what is the required number of employees that we need. And then we forecast supply using skill inventory, replacement charts, Markov analysis, succession planning. You do all of that, and then you have a supply. So demand for how many employees would we require in future, supply of how many employees do we have right now. Then you have those three equations, right? So what do we do? Demand is greater than supply, or demand is equal to supply, or supply is greater than demand. So in these situations, what do? You acquire personnel. Acquiring personnel is hiring. So we hire. We hire only when demand is greater than supply. We need more candidates, more employees. And then we need to do effective utilization. So we have demand is equal to supply. So we have the right number of employees for the right number of jobs, but we need to utilize them a lot more effectively. So through transfers, through promotions, through succession planning, we manage all of them quite well. So effective utilization of HR within the organization. Then a lot of employees may be there in the organization who are there, but they are not adequate. They need to be equipped. So training and development and more robust performance management and feedback mechanism will also help them to identify areas that they need to improve, and they can improve. So training, very strong training and development needs to be given, especially when we are relying on employees, hiring employees from within the organization. Retention is also an important strategy to make sure that employees, key employees, or those very bankable, dependable employees don't quit your organization. So today we have employment retention strategies to make sure that all those grievant employees, all those dissatisfied employees, employees who are having a mind of leaving the organization. So we try to find out what is their issue, what's the problem, and what is that they are dissatisfied about. An organization goes to an extent to engage them well and to also come out with strategies to retain. So these are some of those very important HR activities and techniques that we have to make sure that we ensure that the right people stay with the organization, and then you utilize them well, and don't go into the situation of hiring, because hiring is always difficult. Getting a new employee and then having and waiting for that employee to get adjusted, to get groomed, to get trained, and to finally deliver takes time. So gestation is a minimum of 3 months to about 6 months. You've got to wait for that candidate to deliver. Whereas an existing employee, if you retain the employee, always is good, because the existing employee knows the organization well. So you just have to see what you can do to satisfy them and keep them happy in the organization, and they will be able to do that well. So what are the requisite aspects? What's going to make your HRP very perfect? Right? HRP can be perfect only when it goes alongside business planning. That strategic planning of the organization and the HR planning must go hand in hand. Second is you need top management support. So absolute unconditional top management support, both in terms of support as well as information, should be available, so that the HR also understands what is there in the mind of the management. Third, we need to do periodic reviews and revision to forecast demand and forecasting technique. Not doing it once a year. You should do demand forecasting every quarter, so that your estimates are more or less accurate. You're not surprised when you get some result at the end of the year. You must do both short-term planning as well as long-term planning, and then make sure that you don't resort to crisis management or take decisions on knee-jerk reactions. This usually happens for an organization that is not planned, an organization that has not forecasted, an organization that was not prepared. So they do crisis management after employees leave the organization. Then they start, trying to see where we can get a replacement. So that's an absolute waste of time, money, and energy. And then you need an excellent HRIS system, so that you have an up-to-date information of all the employees who are working in the organization. There must be an active involvement and coordination between the line managers and the HR managers. Who are the line managers? Line managers are those immediate bosses who are running the departments and the organizations, and they are the ones to whom subordinates are reporting. And HR is a staffing function. So HR department only will assist the line managers in production, HR, marketing, R&D, and so on. So it's got to be an excellent coordination and rapport between the line managers and the HR, because whatever HR needs to do can be implemented only by the line managers. So only if that coordination is there, the to and fro of information and activity can happen quite easily, and that can help you to get your HRP perfect, and then make sure that you are able to get to that estimate, which is equal to what you forecast. So finally, that sums up, and that brings us to what we started with HRP. So it's the starting point. It's a very critical function because this is the beginning of the primary function, and all other HR activities like recruitment, selection, performance appraisal, training and development, all of that is going to flow from what you have estimated in the HRP. So HRP is that mother document, or it's going to be that primary source from where all other activities are going to derive their planning objectives. Secondly, it's a very futuristic plan. So if you are thinking about running an organization, if you have some great plans and then you've strategized what you want to do in the next 3 years and 5 years and 10 years, you've got to make sure that whatever business planning that your organization is doing, whatever activity is being organized to implement those strategies, you have to make sure you are responsible for the human resource to be brought into the organization. So it's a responsibility of the HR team. So make sure that you give the brightest, the finest, the fittest, and the most skillest employees. You bring them on board so that when your organization is going to implement your strategy, you have the right people in the right positions doing the right jobs. And that can happen only when you look at HRP in totality and use the following methods that we discussed, and then assess the business environment quite well, periodically review your HRP, and then have the right numbers in place when your organization is ready to strategize and is ready to move into the future by implementing those strategies. So that's where this topic becomes extremely, extremely important for us to understand. All right, any questions here? I mean, we just have another minute. Any questions? Anything that you can turn on your videos and you can come back. Any questions? Anything that so this will make more sense when we practically see how we can implement. That is why those scenarios are important for us. The expansion, recession, technology advancements, right? So whenever something of that sort happens, immediately your HRP gets affected. So immediately you have to make some flexible arrangements to see how it can be customized and it can match your requirement. Okay, so that's how we go about forecasting demand as well as forecasting supply, and then ensuring that we have the right number of people to take up those jobs. All right, any questions? Anything you have to add or you want some clarification? All right, then if there is nothing, then we will end the class. Okay, so we will look at the next topic. So we're going into the next topic. HRP is over, so we will look at 1 or 2 case examples or activities, and then see how well you have understood your HRP, and then we'll move to the next topic. Okay. All right then. Thank you.